the uprising, especially in Egypt, happened to coincide fortuitously with a very important popular uprising in the industrial heartland of the United States, in Madison, Wisconsin, Ohio, other states, where there's very significant popular uprising, tens of thousands of people in the streets, occupying the state capitol, going on for weeks, working people, defending working people and democracy. A very important event took place right in the middle of this on February 20th. An Egyptian labor leader, Kamal Abbas, sent a message from Tahrir Square in Cairo to Wisconsin workers, in which he said, "We stand with you as you stood with us." A statement of solidarity from Cairo workers to Wisconsin workers. Well, there have been years of struggle of Egyptian workers for basic rights. This uprising is not coming out of nowhere. Abbas's message of solidarity evoked the traditional aspiration of labor movements for back into the 19th century, namely solidarity among working people of the world. In fact, populations of the world generally. Well, labor movements have had many flaws, but they have regularly been in the forefront of popular struggles for basic rights and also for democratic rights. In Tahrir Square in Egypt, in the streets of Madison and many other places, the popular struggles that are now underway reach quite directly to the long-term prospects for authentic democracy. I mean by that a democracy in which people have some role in determining government policies. In Tunisia and Egypt, where there's been a kind of a limited toleration of the uprisings by the West, there have been impressive victories, but limited victories. The Carnegie Endowment, one of the main research institutes in the United States, a few days ago it reported that while names have changed, the regimes remain. As they put it, a change in ruling elites and the change in system of governance is still a distant goal. Now, the report goes on to discuss internal barriers to democracy. For example, the fact that, crucially, the fact that in Egypt, the military, which still runs the country, is deeply involved, deeply embedded in the system of economic and political governance. They own large parts of the economy, and surely the high command, the generals, are not going to give up their privileges and power easily. So they do discuss internal barriers to democracy. However, they don't discuss the external barriers, and these are quite significant. For the United States and its allies in the West, we can be confident that they're going to do anything they can to prevent authentic democracy in the Arab world. And there's a very simple reason for that, which would be obvious if the basic facts were reported. But you can find them, they're public. I'm referring to studies of Arab public opinion. What they reveal is that in the Arab world, by overwhelming majorities, Arabs regard the United States and Israel as the leading threats that they face. In Egypt, the most important country, 90% of Egyptians regard the United States as the major threat. The rest of the region slightly lower, but pretty similar. Some of them, there are people who regard Iraq as a threat. Iran, the official enemy, as a threat. 10%. In the Arab world, 10% of the population considers Iran to be a threat. In fact, opposition to U.S. policy is so strong that a large majority think the region would be more secure if Iran had nuclear weapons. In Egypt, that's 80%. Other figures are pretty similar, but the conclusion is that if there was something approaching real democracy in the Arab world, meaning the public opinion could influence policy, the United States not only wouldn't control the region, but it wouldn't be there at all. It would be eliminated, would be expelled along with its allies. And that would undermine fundamental principles of global dominance that go far back. Support for democracy, that's the province of ideologists and propagandists, but it's not part of the real world. In fact, it's quite well established and even conceded reluctantly by the best scholarship that the United States supports democracy only insofar as it corresponds to strategic and economic objectives. And in fact, the contempt for democracy, not just by the leadership, but by the general intellectual community, a general elite contempt, that was revealed very dramatically in the reaction to the WikiLeaks exposures. The ones that received the most attention, big headlines, euphoric commentary, were the cables that reported that the Arabs support the United States stand on Iran, support the United States stand on Iran. The reference was to the Arab dictators. They allegedly support U.S. policy, so that's wonderful. What about the attitudes of the public? If you check, you find that they were not mentioned. Public doesn't matter. And there's a principle behind this. It was formulated quite clearly by a well-known Middle East specialist, Marwan Muasher, is formerly a high official of the Jordanian dictatorship. The principle is there's nothing wrong, everything is under control, meaning as long as the population is passive, apathetic, and obedient, you can disregard them. If the dictators support us, there's no other question that has to be asked. Well, this doctrine, the Muasher doctrine, is very rational and very venerable. I'll just mention one case that's highly relevant today and should again be reported in the front pages if you want to understand what's happening. Over 50 years ago, President Eisenhower, in internal discussion since declassified, he expressed concern over what he called the campaign of hatred against us among the people in the Arab world, and not the governments, which are pretty supportive, but among the population. And he thought that might be a problem. The highest planning body, the National Security Council, came out with a major study about this, and it explained that there's a perception in the Arab world that the United States supports harsh and brutal dictators and blocks democracy and development, and that we do it because we want to maintain control over their energy resources. And it went on to say that the perception is pretty accurate, and furthermore, that's what we should be doing. That's correct. That expresses the Muasher doctrine. It's rather interesting that after 9/11, you may recall, George Bush made a plaintive speech in which he said they hate our freedoms. Right after that, the Pentagon carried out a study to evaluate that claim and concluded that they don't hate our freedoms, they hate our policies. In other words, exactly as in 1958.